Good afternoon, viewers. Welcome back to Balance, where each week we talk about the importance of balancing your body, mind, spirit, and community. I'm John, and today our guests are Dale and Ross Thompson. Welcome to Balanced. Good afternoon, viewers. Thank you again for tuning in to our Balanced episodes. We have a treat today. We get to talk to two brothers who are in the same field of work, and it's going to be a good conversation. This is our second episode in our Family Balance series. And last week, you got to hear a very interesting conversation from Pastor Michael Head about what it means to have good balance in your family just by how parents play with their kids. And if you have a challenge with that, some things to think through. So we're somewhat talking in the same lane a little bit here based on Michael's story. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But before we do, I want to welcome in our guest today. First is, well, I don't know. Do I do this by order of birth? Does it matter?
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, I don't even know the order of birth, so you'll have to help me out. So I'm going to guess that Dale is the older. Am I right? Okay,
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Well, that's cool. Dale, you were on with us a couple months ago, so welcome back. Thanks for
Thank
joining us
you.
today. And viewers, if you haven't caught on to what I'm talking about, Dale and his brother Ross are twins. So Dale's 5 minutes older than Ross. How's that make you feel, Ross? All your life you've had to deal with that, I'm sure.
Well, the story is I kicked him out, so it's a
Oh,
good. Yeah,
and has that been your lifelong journey? Just getting him in the butt? Is that it?
reach. So that's what we always tell everyone. Yeah, he's the one running ahead a lot, though,
There
for
we go.
sure. Her leg, I could go on about that, but
Well, this is cool. We get to have a set of brothers on the episode today, and both of you are in the same lane of work, and so you obviously have much to help us. So, viewers, today we're going to tackle what I hope to be a very helpful, encouraging topic. And first, though, we need to define it. So, the question we're trying to answer today is how do you support a family member who's going through, an emotional mental health crisis? And again, to clarify, it's not you that we're talking. If you are the one dealing with that, the family members that surround that person. So, again, pointing back to our episode last week, in that case, it would have been the family members who surrounded Michael. So that's what we want to address today and just give you some encouragement about that, some things to think through. But Ross, I'll start with you. When we talk about an emotional mental health crisis, I think it's important certainly just to define what we mean by that. So help us out. When we say someone's in an emotional crisis, mental health crisis, of course, I'm sure that could cover a lot of different possibilities, but the word crisis, what does that mean for us, Ross?
well, especially from a mental health perspective, we use the word acuity to define what level of crisis it's at. And high acuity is when you need the most support. So typically in people's lives, there can be a buildup. There can be stages in life that are crisis stages that we traditionally think about, but also there can be events that prompt a crisis. So it is a very broad question. Each of those poses a different concern for the family. Recently, friends of ours went through a car accident with a bunch of people involved. They're in crisis dealing with that altogether. But there's also situations that are multi-generational where there's patterns that have been passed along. And sometimes at different stages, the families react to those and individuals within the family reacts to those. And then sometimes we impose it on ourselves, especially regarding kids. I unfortunately have a lot of families divorcing that I work with the kids, and that's kind of an imposed crisis because everything gets reset and has to be reworked to make it work for the best interest of the kids. So that's where the professional counselor comes in, because if they can get a read of the situation, they can help understand what the cause and effect are, as well as what are the pieces that need to be put in place to help support. And each level of acuity determines more support.
That's wow, that's quite fascinating. So, Dale, it sounds like maybe an initial job for both of you when you begin with the client is to sort of figure out what level of crisis they're at. Does that sound right?
Well, absolutely. As clients come to us, we do our intake review and interview that would determine particularly what's going on. More likely than not, folks have waited longer than they should have to seek help. So the acuity is elevated, and multiple factors kind of are engaged. If it's a specific life crisis, like a top 10 stressor, or something going on, like Russ has mentioned, a divorce or something else that's happening medically or whatever, as well as combined with like the global stressors like we've had in this past year with COVID, things get amplified and they need to seek help, and we'll do our interviews and determine diagnostics and interventions that can support them. Obviously, being faith-based, we're also checking in on where they are spiritually and what's happening in the sense of their connection with God, as well as the other factors from a family support dynamic. Being our topic today, the reality of the family supporting folks that they think are in distress, one of the first things I have to check in with is, where are they? I got a call today, for example, from a mother that wanted help from her son. And I've never seen them before, but it was pretty clear it was the mother's issue. It wasn't the son's issue. And we can also often then project onto family members what might or might not be our issue, something we have to be honest with.
Yeah, wow, we could probably do like 4 episodes about this topic, right? Because you just opened up a whole nother can of worms right there. But and help us understand it as best you can when when a family needs to stop trying to figure it out themselves and move into some professional help. How do they figure that out?
Well, again, there's not a specific moment unless there's some event that has brought it on. But what I will say is that, especially with what Dale was saying about being part of a faith community, we can be much more in tune with each other out of that support system. So I love to look at counseling more from a growth perspective rather than a crisis perspective. And so part of the struggle is to recognize that counseling is there for support first, but it can be there when there's a crisis situation. So naturally, when there is a crisis, I think of where we're living. There's different aspects of our life, from school to work to family. And when you have more than one of those areas where you're really struggling, that's a good indicator to get help support. When it's one area, it could be, again, maybe something developmental in the family. You're going through a stage of family systems development, or at work, there could be conflict, or there could be a challenge that you're facing. But when your struggle is crossing boundaries between different aspects of your life, then that's when it's really good indicator to get some extra support. And that's where counselors can be really helpful.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and it isn't rocket science, but light bulbs start going off when you start talking about these things. It's almost like we'd rather have a maintenance program, so to speak, than the crisis react program. Is that a good language, Dale?
Yeah, but let's be honest, we're all kind of in such high output mode with everything going on in our families. It's hard to do that.
Yeah.
Build in the time, budget the costs until something bubbles up. unless your family culture is really empathic that way, and it's grounded in a sense of really checking in there. We're much more into functional realities of getting to work, getting home, getting the homework done, feeding everybody, and then to think about selfish self-care time for emotional support as a regular maintenance is pretty difficult. But I did want to give you some cues for families specifically that they can look for in family members and even themselves if they're in distress, to think about what takes it past, hey, somebody's having a bad day, to, whoa, these guys are, I really need to get my daughter, sister, uncle, whoever, to in front of somebody.
Okay.
One, first of all, recognize there's tremendous amount of options available, especially in Sarasota, Manatee County. We have a tremendous hearth of and excuse me, a tremendous list of folks that they could seek help from, agencies, the spiritual, secular, etc. But let me go through this list real quick so we can just bullet it out. So is the family member experiencing just unexpected mood swings or different mood behavior pattern than recognized over the time that you would be with them? Is there a big change in their life, significant, sometimes positive stressor changes or issues too, like a new job, not just a divorce or something super obvious? Are they, one of the obvious ones that you hopefully would know is if they're having harmful thoughts or they're thinking about hurting somebody else, definitely want to pursue some help. Are they withdrawing from things that they would normally be engaged in and spend time with? Are they explaining that they're feeling isolated, alone, not able to feel joy, helpless? Those are just a few things amongst many that we can look for in our family members to help take it to the next level for our sense of urgency, and to realize what we can, that we should get help and have maybe potentially a limited ability to impact it ourselves, just being a caring family member.
So when a family gets to that spot, all right, we're going to be in this a while, whatever this is. What are some things that the family just sort of has to come to grips with, some new realities for them just to, be aware of and understand?
Well, the first thing, again, we're going to be repetitive here, but
Okay.
there is support. Dale mentioned getting isolated and withdrawing. That is one of the primary ways that we can serve when we're struggling. The problem is when we withdraw enough, we stop the process of healing or addressing issues. Secondly, you mentioned a family dynamic. One of the probably daily things I mention is, as a family, we smell each other first. And what I mean by that is there's this level of relating as a family that only happens through our senses and happens because of that special connection that's unique. So that amplifies reactions to each other because we're on this sensory, maybe more primitive level of relating to each other. So again, that support, getting a counselor involved, it could begin with getting a mentor or someone who is known out of their wisdom involved. But again, just as Dale mentioned and I did, it gets to a threshold of acuity where you need extra professional help. And that's where the counselor is invaluable, because they can be neutral. You're going to sense each other, but not on the level you do as a family. And then they can bring that expertise to sort that through. I will put a peg down here with teenagers, especially because they don't have a lot of self-awareness that creates healthy boundaries, and often are struggling both with their family and with peers with that bleeding out of issues without it being addressed in a safe and caring way.
Yeah, there's a whole nother episode just right there, right?
Well said.
Yeah. So I want to end with us giving a family member this is helping today. I want to end maybe with one other hopeful, applicable kind of question. And Dale, you gave us that list of things to be looking for and sort of triggers, you might say. Ross, as you were just describing the family who's now in the throes of this, and they're working with the counselor and they're learning stuff and becoming aware. When they're home by themselves or when they're on the cell phone, they mean well, but sometimes the language can get a little crazy because it's new language. So I'm curious if there are suggestions that you have. I'll start with you, Dale, about just how to assure and support and be with your family member as they go through this, because it could be a while. It could be weeks or months. Who knows how long it's going to be. So just things that they could say, or things to avoid saying in vocabulary as they speak with their family member who's going through this. You got some thoughts on that, Dale?
Sure. Just off the top of my head, things with affirmations. I'm here for you. I care about you. I'm worried about you. I'm thinking this is more than I can handle. I really can I help you maybe plug into a counselor? Can we call the 211 helpline together? I'm worried for your safety. I'm really feeling overwhelmed with what you're saying, so I can only imagine how you're feeling. Things like that would coach the individual to not feel judged, but to feel like, hey, they're not alone, to help transition or segue to getting support and plugging into folks that have more resources. And let me tell you, there's phenomenal resources. If you're a woman, you can reach out to the Women's Resource Center. There's domestic violence intervention projects. If you're a family, there's the teen intervention programs. There's all kind of resources through the guidance counselors at school that will help transition folks into services. So a family member might empower themselves by doing some research in advance, but ultimately being present with the family member that's in distress is half the battle, where they don't feel judged, isolated, or otherwise blamed for certain behaviors that maybe they can't even sort out themselves, in terms of having control, not having control, or not sure what to do with the next step.
Yeah. I want to circle back and well, actually circle two words you use because I think they're so helpful, and that is to have more of a coach mindset than a judging, blaming, shame, guilt, kind of mindset. Ross, can you speak to that? How does someone have, because they may not even understand what that means, but how could they be more of a coach to their family member?
So there's faith principles that are also very true in psychology. The scripture that talks about being quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry, which again relates to what I was talking about earlier, meaning we need to be careful about our reactiveness. Secondly, that reactiveness can also include trying to solve the problem for them rather than giving them choices. So there's two key processes that a family member can apply. One is put choices next to each other rather than being directive, because when you become directive, it antagonizes that sense and react mode that they're in. The second is our biggest tool, especially as our children grow into adulthood, is repetition. It's not persuasion. So when we get into a lecture type mode, we lose that connection with our kids, and maybe adult kids, rather than just being really consistent about the suggestions that we're making. Just like Dale was saying, if we can be really consistent with it. And then the final point I would add again is don't do it alone. We tend to try to jump in when we're problem solving as a parent, and we need support around us. So get good counsel.
We've packed a lot into these few minutes here, guys, and I want to encourage the viewers with what Ross just said. If you are feeling alone, certainly, and both guys, Dale and Ross, have given you plenty of encouragement. You don't have to be in that space. Please reach out to either Ross or Dale. Call our office. If you got another source, just reach out, and don't be in a place where you feel like you're trapped and isolated and all alone. And that's why we're doing these videos, to try to give you this space to learn, but also take action when it's necessary. So guys, I want to thank you for helping us today. Really, really good insight and suggestions. Thank you for doing that for us today.
Thank you, John.
My pleasure.
Viewers, will be back next Wednesday with our third episode of Family Balance. We hope you'll join us next Wednesday at noon.